Okay. That being said, we will go right into the appointments. Just a reminder for the committee members, this is not a process where afterwards we have a vote. We will be hearing from the members. You are allowed to ask questions, but it's not a process where we'll have a committee meeting afterwards. We're going to begin with the first person who is here. That's Andrew Gearing of New Haven. Are you here?
I am here, Senator. I'm a little under the weather, so I'm going to leave my camera off.
Okay. You have approximately 3 minutes. I will let you know when the 3 minutes are up and you may begin.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. My name is Andrew Gearing. I'm an attorney at the Federal Public Defender Office for the District of Connecticut. I've been there for about 4 years. Prior to that, I worked as a litigation associate at Wigan and Dana in New Haven and at Sullivan and Cromwell in New York. And I served as a law clerk for Judge Thompson, a federal trial court judge in Hartford. I grew up in West Haven, Connecticut. I'm a first-generation professional. I live in New Haven. I'm involved in a range of civic and volunteering roles, including serving on the New Haven Free Public Board of Library, on the board of directors of the New Haven Free Public Library, the Connecticut Arts Alliance, and the American Civil Liberties Union. I work regularly with people experiencing incarceration and have for the past several years. Approximately half of my clients are detained pre-trial, and about half of those are detained in a variety of Connecticut Department of Correction institutions. Also, while I was in private practice, I represented people experiencing incarceration as plaintiffs in Section 1983 civil rights actions. I became sort of aware of this committee while advocating with Stop Solitary CT on behalf of the PROTECT Act. And I was very grateful to see that it was passed and that a position for an ombudsman was created, which I was surprised to learn had existed previously, and I believe for finance or budgetary reasons was eliminated. So happy to serve and provide my perspective, however helpful, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Geary, and thank you for being willing to serve. Are there questions from members of the committee? Just a reminder, we haven't had a hearing in a while. If you have a question, raise your hand electronically, and I will call on you. Any questions? Any questions? I don't see any. Again, thank you for being willing to serve. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Senator.
We will next hear from Melvin Medina of Hartford.
Greetings to the chair, Senator Winfield, and to the members of the Judiciary Committee. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I just got my kid to school and got back in time, which I'm really glad about. I'm excited to have the opportunity to serve on the Advisory Commission for a variety of reasons. I have about a 10-year background in doing advocacy work in the state of Connecticut. In the last recent years, I've been doing work nationally with the American Civil Liberties Union, and criminal justice has been a core issue that I've worked on historically. It is something both personal. I have had members of my family incarcerated either in Connecticut, in Puerto Rico, in federal prisons as well. I'm aware of the deep impact that incarceration has on people. I'm also aware of the deep impact that that violence has on our community. I think that the move that the Judiciary Committee made last year to set up this advisory committee is going to be incredibly important. I'm a big believer in government transparency, and nothing is better than bringing to light the work the good work that government employees do. But to do that, you need an advisory committee and an ombudsman program that has a clear, critical eye on the actions of the Department of Corrections, who admittedly have a very difficult job. Many DOC employees are in a tough position, having to make judgment calls. I think an advisory commission and an ombudsman program provides the kind of input and protections that incarcerated people need and that the DOC needs to adequately and properly administer its duty of caring for people in its prisons and jails. So for that reason, I'm incredibly excited. I came to put my name in for consideration after Connecticut's mother of activism, Barbara Fair, who led Stop Solitary, reached out to me asking if I would consider to serve. I saw it as a great opportunity to lend my voice and volunteer to make corrections better by ensuring that we had a proper ombudsman program and a qualified candidate to serve and protect incarcerated people to ensure that they're leading just and thriving lives in their current situation. So that's generally a little bit about me, and happy to answer any questions that committee members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Medina. It's good to see you again. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Questions or comments? I don't see any. So I want to thank you for joining us this morning, and we will hear next from Kaisha Velasquez. Is Kaisha on? All right, we'll run back around to see at the end. Benjamin Howell.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Sorry, Senator Winfield, I missed the beginning. What is being asked of me to speak on? I'm happy to discuss my role on the commission.
So all of you who are appointees have 3 minutes to introduce yourself, tell us why volunteering to be a member of the committee, and there may be some questions for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Winfield, and the members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Ben Howell. I'm a physician, general internist here at the Yale School of Medicine. I also research the impact of incarceration on health outcomes as part of the SACE Center here at Yale. I'm very honored to be considered for this appointment. I've spent the last 10 years researching the health impact of mass incarceration on people, especially after they are released back into the community. And I can tell you that for better or for worse, the exposure to mass incarceration does have significant health impacts on people as they move forward in their lives. I do think the conditions of incarceration are very important, how we use solitary, whether we use solitary, ideally, in every way, trying to improve the outcomes of people after they're released. I can say that I'm really excited to join this group and help appoint the ombudsman who will be overseeing the implementation of the PROTECT Act. I was very honored to be asked by Barbara Fair and the Stop Solitary Committee to be considered, and I hope to bring to bear my research experience and my clinical experience on this role.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments?
Senator Winfield?
Yes, Senator Kissel.
Good morning to everyone. Regarding your nomination, sir, doctor, seems like you're particularly focused on solitary confinement. I don't know if you were part of the lobbying to address that issue over the last few years. Now, maybe I'm confused. I thought this group in its totality addresses all issues regarding inmates and confinement. And my concern is, are you laser focused on this issue of solitary confinement, A, and B, it sounds like you're predisposed against corrections, period. You said that there's health consequences for quote unquote mass confinement. I got to be honest, I don't know any other way of having corrections operate other than various forms of confinement, either There could be dormitory style, and certainly within Connecticut, which is run by the state. And I've always been opposed to private incarceration, those companies. But we have dormitory style. We have various levels of protection, both for the inmates and for the staff. And so I'm just wondering, are you open-minded regarding these issues, or are you going to be pushing a particular approach? And I guess, I'm sorry, there's like a third point. I've toured on more than, or at least once, Garner, and I've known about Garner because there's always been a tension, because we tend to have a lot of our mental health patients in Garner, down in Newtown. And there's been a tension between the medical folks and the corrections officers, because if an inmate acts out and maybe poses a threat either to the staff or other inmates, there may be tickets involved, there may be restrictions of privileges and things like that. And the medical folks tend to be in opposition to that, saying that that's not appropriate. And I'm just wondering where you fall on those issues.
Well, Senator Kissel, you mentioned several things, so I hope to address as many of them as possible. I would not say, I guess, to your first point, whether I was part of the lobbying, I'm not a lobbyist. I would not describe myself in that way. Did I provide testimony when the PROTECT Act was considered? Yes, I did. Did I support its passing? Yes, I did. I guess your larger point is this balance between public safety, corrections, and the health of people who are incarcerated. My hope is, and I think there's international examples as well as other examples in our country, that the needs of public safety can also be addressed while minimizing the harms of incarceration. So that I think that is the role of this group. The role of the committee is to minimize the harm of incarceration while serving the greater good of public safety. I don't think I'm predisposed in any way, one way or the other than to say that I am a physician and that my focus on health impacts is primary, but I am open-minded to considering the balance of those issues. I don't know if that addresses your concerns.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Doctor, for wanting to volunteer. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. Comment or question from other members of the committee? Comment or question? Seeing none, thank you very much for being willing to serve. We will hear next from Melinda Johnson. Is Melinda on? I don't see her yet. We'll come back around at the end and see if she's there. Next, we'll hear from, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Taj Dooley?
Yes, it's Tig. Thank you.
Tig?
Tig, yes, like tiger.
Okay, thank you. I will make sure I get it right next time.
I thought you were calling on me when I saw the look of concern on your face there.
Sorry about that.
Not at all, not at all. Thank you very much, Senator Winfield and other members of the committee. It's a real honor and privilege for me to appear before you this morning to be considered for this important committee. I'm a litigation partner at Wigan and Dana in New Haven. Prior to that, I was a law clerk to two federal judges, Jose Cabranes on the Second Circuit here and Judge Robert Shotney on the District Court in Hartford. And I would say that during particularly that first district court clerkship, when I handled a great many prisoner cases under Section 1983 involving all manner of things, from conditions of confinement to excessive force, et cetera, I really became aware or had a feeling that many of these cases probably wouldn't need to end up in federal court if there was a better process of communicating and listening in both directions in our prisons. And as in private practice, I've represented a number of prisoners in these cases on a pro bono basis, and have really gotten that same feeling that a lot of complaints which end up in court really stem from initial complaints and that are not handled within the prisons, and that these inmates do not feel listened to. So that's what I've tried to do in my practice, is actually listen. And of course, I get to listen to the defendant's side when I'm representing a plaintiff in a prisoner case as well. And that's really what I look forward to doing as a member of this committee if I'm confirmed for the position, which is to continue listening to both inmates and corrections staff to see how we can continue this process of reform that the PROTECT Act commenced. And I look forward as well to learning from my fellow committee members, some of whom I'm meeting for the first time this morning and some of whom I know. And I think it will be a real privilege for me to be able to continue playing some role in these reform efforts in Connecticut. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for volunteering to serve. Representative Callahan.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Winfield, and good morning, Mr. Dooley. I was concerned, not concerned, just curious. In your practice, you said you did represent many defendants, some of them having been incarcerated individuals. Am I correct in that?
Yes, I've represented them as plaintiffs. So as you may know, Representative Callahan, the district court appoints lawyers from private practice to represent inmates in pro bono cases. Not all of them, obviously, but in a number. And so I've been appointed probably 4 or 5 times, both by the district court and the Second Circuit, to represent inmates in these cases.
Thank you. And I was curious, in your private practice, do you ever have the opportunity to represent victims of crimes?
I have not. No, I mean, my private practice, I'm an appellate attorney, primarily doing civil work. I have represented victims of domestic violence, again, on a pro bono basis, not specifically with respect to the crimes committed on them. But yeah, that's not a part of my private practice. And, we don't really get appointed on a pro bono basis to represent victims as much.
No, I would see that you wouldn't on a pro bono basis, but in your private practice, I just wondered if at paid clients you had the opportunity to represent victims, was really my question.
I have not as a paid client, no.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Callahan. Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Counselor, for coming and testifying. 2 sort of questions. If you've had this litigation with the state, what's your relationship been with the attorneys for the state of Connecticut? I'm guessing assistant attorney generals representing the Department of Corrections. And B, you said that you know some of these other nominees, and I'm just wondering, how did you get to know some of these other nominees to this panel through you, Mr. Chair?
Sure. Thank you, Senator Kissel. With respect to your first question, yes, I've, obviously the assistant attorneys general represent defendants in the cases where I've represented the plaintiffs. And so I've had, cordial relations in the same way I do with opposing counsel and in my private practice. So I've worked with a number, or I suppose against, but in some sense with a number of assistant attorneys general in the attorney general's office. And I find, they're trying to do the best job they can as well. And I think you do learn in these cases a great deal about the pressures and difficulties for corrections staff and for the folks who are sort of minding our prisoners. And I think that's really important. And I hope to be a part of this position as kind of hearing all sides of these issues and trying to move forward together. With respect to your second question, you heard earlier from Mr. Gearing, who was an associate at my law firm, and I got to know him there. I also know him through community involvement in New Haven, where I also live. I don't believe I know other members who've been appointed.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Attorney Dooley. Question that got prompted for me. I want to know if any of the plaintiffs that you have represented have actually been victims themselves, to your knowledge.
I would think all of them, Representative Porter. I mean, victims of crimes specifically.
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't represented them in that capacity, but I have met very few prisoners who are not themselves victims of crimes at some point prior to their own incarceration. I currently, I know one man I'm representing. I do know that he was a victim of crime before, and I would frankly just assume that for many of the others. And of course, some are the victims of assault in prison as well, which is also a crime.
Thank you. I appreciate you answering that question and making that point for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Porter. Comment or question from other members of the committee? Comment or question? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you, Mr. Dooley, and I think it's time tied. Thank you for being willing to serve. We will hear next from John Bowen.
Hi, good morning. I apologize. I'm having issues with my computer. Can you hear me clearly?
We do hear. I hear you clearly.
Okay. Well, if I can't, please bring it to my attention. Good morning, Senator Winfield.
Can you turn on your camera?
I'm sorry.
Can you turn on your camera? The little
Yeah,
button?
that's the issue I'm having. I was working before, but now I'm trying to work on that right now.
Senator Kissel,
you want to pass me over and see if I can get it done?
I think he has a bandwidth issue, Senator Kissel. So, as you know, sometimes turning off the camera helps with that.
Gotcha.
Am I good to go?
Yeah, proceed.
Yes. All right. Again, good morning, Senator Winfield, Senator Kissel, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is John Bowen. It's an honor to be nominated to the Correction Advisory Committee. The House ranking member's nominee must be someone who I believe is an expert in corrections. July 1st, I recently retired after serving as a correction officer for more than 21 years at several facilities. I've served as a union steward and have been elected to the vice president of the Corrections Employees Local 391. During this time, I have become an expert in the operations and workings of Connecticut's corrections system. Throughout my 21 years, I've received plenty of department correction training, anywhere from first aid to crisis management and de-escalation of incidents. I also hold an associate's degree in criminal justice. I feel I've worked well both with inmates and staff. And with staff, I was one of the founding members of the Employees Assistant Unit, which helped staff who might be suffering from post-traumatic stress or other stresses from the job. I've lived in Enfield, Connecticut for the past 30 plus years. And in that time, I've been an active part of my community and most proud of being a Cub Scout leader for my son's pack. I believe it's important that all Americans should serve their community. And I would like to continue to do that through this appointment. I'd like to again, thank Senator Kissel for nominating me, and please feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you for being willing to serve. Senator Kissel.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Bowen, for being willing to serve. You've got a lot of experience in the Department of Corrections. You are a Senate ranking member nominee, not the House. Nothing against the good Representative Fishbein. I'm sure he has a fabulous nominee as well. And I just think that you're bringing a perspective that's good for the balance of this group regarding your experiences, which going into retirement and yet still being close to the community. And as I'm sure everybody who's been offering questions knows, North Central Connecticut and my Senate district in particular has more correctional facilities than any other place in Connecticut. Nothing against the Cub Scouts. I think that's all awesome as well. So, Mr. Bowen, it would have been great if I could actually see you on this Zoom meeting, but
yes, I apologize.
Understanding the good chair's notice of the bandwidth issue, I'm just happy you're able to participate, and thank you for your volunteerism. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. Representative Callahan.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks, Mr. Bowen, for being here and speaking with us this morning.
Yes, sir.
My background, as some of the people on this Zoom know, is I was a probation supervisor for many, many years. I know Daryl knows that. He's sitting there. We've met many times. Our goal with probation was to not have people fail and go to jail, and we wanted them to succeed. I'm sure as a corrections officer, your goal was the same, to have them matriculate well into the general population. But as with probation, unfortunately, sometimes a warrant had to be sought for violation of probation if they became a danger to themselves or others. With in DOC, as much as you want people to rehabilitate and do well matriculating in general population, are there situations where you see the inmate becomes a danger to themselves and others, and sometimes need to be separated from general pop?
Yes, I do. I've seen it many times, especially in the case you're speaking of, someone who was released on a probationary period, and for some reason they were violated. When they're brought back in, they are, adamant that they didn't do anything wrong, and they tend to be a little more aggressive, because now they have to come in and serve the rest of their sentence, which could be many years. And with that being said, some of them do become more, like I said, more active or more volatile than other inmates who are there already. And in that case, yes, sometimes I end up going to, if there's an incident, they end up going to segregation for several days until they can come back out into the general pop area.
Well, thank you for your answer. I wasn't really trying to zero in just on probation, people who've had warrants served and had to go back and serve the suspended portion of their sentence. I was, and believe me, so people on this committee know, when a probation violation is written, it's usually after numerous attempts to step in, and any judge who reads one of our warrants usually says, gosh, why are you giving so many chances? But my question for you was someone who maybe isn't in for a violation of probation, but just, it may be the same answer, but if they're in general population, but they become a danger to themselves, the staff, or other inmates, I would assume your answer is the same. They may have to be separated until they're not a danger any longer.
Yeah, correct. I apologize. Yes, it pretty much it would be an identical answer, whether they're in there for their sentence and they become, if they get bad news from home, or something that happens inside the prison, where they become volatile or dangerous to themselves, dangerous to staff, dangerous to other inmates. They have to be separated from that area to keep everyone safe for a period of time, which would be determined by the administration.
Thank you. And are they allowed still some recreation time even when they've been separated from Gen Pop?
Yes, they are. When they are put in segregation, if you would call it, they do have the ability to go out for rec. It's their option. It's not forced, but they are given the option to go.
Thank you, because it seems we have several appointees this morning from Stop Solitary, and I just wanted to get some of that information out to see the light of day in this committee meeting. So I appreciate your answers, Mr. Bowen.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being with us this morning, Mr. Bowen. I just wanted to go back to a couple of things that you said. You did touch on a group that you led, I believe, a committee of some sort, on how to deal with stresses of the job amongst your colleagues prior to your retirement. If you could
Correct.
just speak a little bit about, for example, what were some of those things that you did? What were some of the tools that you used to deal with the stresses of the job?
Okay. Yeah, I was referring to it. The acronym is EAU, which stands for an Employees Assistance Unit. It was founded several years ago. The state offers an employees an EAP program, which really is if someone's having issues at work, at home, any type of issue, they would call this number, and it would be a trunk line would be sent off to who knows where. It could be a calling center in another state, and officers and their families would be telling these people the issues they were having. And the people they were speaking with really did not know what they were talking about, because not many people realize the stressors and issues that happen inside of a jail. So several officers got together, and we formed this EAU unit. And basically, it's a 24/7, 365. It's a hotline where any officer, any family member can call and say, it could be anonymous, and they will say, hey, my brother, Mr. Smith, is a CO at ABC jail, and he's having a hard time. And we would reach out to him, offer him counseling if need be, offer him, because we know the language that they speak. He could tell us stuff, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been through that. I've been through this. and we have different facilities that we can send them to for counseling. If they have a drinking problem, addiction problem, it could be all sent. We have places to send them to.
Thank you for that response. And that kind of segues into my next question for you, Mr. Chair. You talk about dealing with the stresses as an employee, and you spoke about segregation and the need to put people in solitary, perhaps if they got bad news from home or they became a danger to themselves or other inmates in the facility. So I'm just wondering, rehabilitation is a big thing for me. What are the resources or the avenues which you guys address that on the other side of the equation? Because I think it's important that, everyone within this system, as toxic as it is, gets the kind of help and rehabilitation that they need. So there's
Correct.
a hotline and there's an employee assistance unit for the employees. Can you speak to what's done if you're removing somebody and putting them in seg, besides separating them from community, what else is there that they get in the way of resources to help them with the stresses of life in prison?
Well, I could speak that they, if they are having personal issues or of anything of that sort, they do have their counselors that they can refer to. There are several what's the word I'm looking for? A reverend, a priest, an imam, that they can refer to. When they're in segregation, even though they're in a cell by themselves, sometimes they're two in a cell. There are officers that every 15 minutes are supposed to walk through, talk to them, make sure everything's okay. And I myself, I remember years would sit there and talk to an inmate, 5-10 minutes, just to let them vent and try to talk them off the ledge. If he was there, but sometimes they just want someone to talk to. They might have had a bad day, and that's what got them into the situation they're in, and to be put in segregation where they blew off the handle, and they just need someone to vent to.
And I think that is absolutely true. And I thank you for being that officer. But I'm also curious as to professional help, right? Social workers, you said counselors, psychiatric help. A lot of these people have mental health illnesses. I'm just trying to figure out, besides putting them in seg and separating them, what does help for them look like?
Well, you just hit the nail on the head there. There are social workers, there are mental health workers in every facility, and if they need that, they're afforded that opportunity. It's not withheld from them in any way. Some of them don't want that. Some of them would rather just talk to fellow inmates that are there that they know that or the staff member which is the frontline CO walking up and down the tier. They would actually, some of them just want to talk to them rather than speak, but they do have the opportunity to see counselors, social workers, mental health, medical, and they're afforded that all the time.
And how many instances have you seen that be the case, Mr. Bowen, where they are actually afforded that opportunity and seek it and actually have an ability to utilize it?
Me personally, I mean, in 21 years, I couldn't even count. It multiple, dozens, hundreds.
Okay, thank you for those responses, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Porter. A comment or question from other members of the committee. If not, Mr. Bowen, are you currently the vice president of the union?
Well, because I retired, I stepped down to give and passed it on to another member. I felt that someone who should be actually working inside should hold that title. I've stepped down. I'm just a member of the executive board now.
What is that? What is that?
The executive board, the hierarchy of the union, there's a president, vice president, 2 other officers, and 5 executive board members, and that body runs the local. And I'm one of the 5 executive board members.
And I'm asking this question because I just want to understand your connection to the union itself, because it has a responsibility to its members, and if you're going to oversight. I am sure there are members of the public who have some concern with that. So I want to be clear about what your role is. So what, as a member of the executive board, what do you do?
I'm here we have monthly meetings. I'm here if we have to make decisions on certain grievances. I still do get calls from staff members, talking about different issues they're having with management, and I field them as best I can. I try to stay away from the actual prisons themselves. I will forward that on to people that are actually boots on the ground that's still working in jail. But I hold this position until May of next year, till my election runs out, my term runs out.
Is it, you may not want to answer this question, but given, and I think you recognize that there may be this concern, given that there may be a concern, is it your intention to seek re-election? If you can't answer that question, you do not have to.
I can't, sir, because I'm retired. I'm not a DOC employee per se anymore, but because I was elected, I have the right to hold this position until May, and then May it's done for me. It ends.
Thank you for being willing to serve, and also thank you for your work establishing the EAU.
Thank you, sir.
We will next hear from, and I may mess up your name, it's John Cipolle.
Yes, Sapoli.
Okay, you have your 3 minutes. You may begin.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Chairman Winfield, Ranking Member Fishbein, Ranking Member Kissel, and other members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is John Sapoli. I am Ranking Member Fishbein's nominee to the Correction Advisory Committee. The House Ranking Member's nominee must be someone who has been a victim of violent crime. I unfortunately do meet this criteria after my brother was murdered. 7 years ago, I became a corrections officer for the state of Connecticut. Recently, I've been promoted to correctional counselor trainee, where after a year, I will be a full-term correctional counselor. I completed my bachelor's degree at Charter Oak State College with coursework in criminal justice, psychology, and sociology. I received qualification training for the TRUE program, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a youthful offender program housed inside Cheshire Correctional Institution. I do believe that vast majority of inmates can redeem themselves and become productive members of the society. As part of the TRUE unit, and now as a correctional counselor trainee, I work directly with inmates to try and help them improve their incarceration time, as well as improve their chances of success when they do complete their sentence. One of my strengths is my objectivity. I do my job without bias. Despite my own personal hardships, I don't let it affect my work. I always remain professional, and I don't treat others based on what has happened outside of work. The correctional ombudsman has a vast latitude to explore and can comment on just about the whole correctional system. I believe that my experience in that system will be of value to the committee and to the correctional ombudsman, as well as the citizens of Connecticut. At this time, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Cipolle. I see Representative Fishbein.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, John. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for offering to serve in this capacity. If you could just expound a little bit on what a corrections counselor does.
Yes, so the correctional counselor, the core root of it is really just starting in the unit, and inmates will constantly go to the counselor, whether it's through written request or in person. And the counselor just starts out working as the bridge between the needs of the inmate and what is available to them. After the basis of what's inside the unit, the correctional counselor will do things such as classification, where that's figuring out the risk and need scores of each inmate and figuring out what their overall level may be, and getting them into the programs that they would need to succeed while they're incarcerated and to help them succeed when they're released.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And once again, thank you for coming here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Representative Fishbein. Senator Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Cipolle, for your for coming over and then speaking to us. I just wanted to ask you, you came before this committee in March and you testified. and you were against Senate Bill 459, and you took a very strong position for being against solitary confinement. Could you tell me where that's coming from in a little bit more depth? Because you've been very public about how you feel that prisoners should be in solitary confinement, some of them.
My stance on that is due solely to the fact that solitary confinement is a broad term that is misconstrued and turned into something that it shouldn't be. In my 7 years in the department, solitary confinement isn't necessarily the case. It's restrictive housing or segregation where that inmate will be separated due to them getting into a fight or their own personal safety. If medical staff find them, it's possible that they're going to harm themselves. They'll be removed and placed in that segregation unit. It's not necessarily solitary confinement. There are opportunities for them to have a cellmate. There are opportunities for them throughout the day to go into what is called a day room or a courtyard, and they do get out of cell time. It's not solitary confinement where they are by themselves, as many may think. That's not necessarily the case, at least in my experience in the past 7 years.
And in your testimony, you had mentioned that prisons are looked at as a place of change, but you said it's not a change. But when you look at the data, when individuals are placed in restricted housing or solitary confinement, it can cause permanent mental health illness in their cases. And there is a negative change rather than a positive change that may happen. Do you have any insight in that aspect? Have you looked at some of that data?
I can't speak on behalf of that. I'm not a professional or clinician in any way. My experience is solely inside of the facility. If there was data collected, that is something that I have not researched on my own. It's something I would be interested in seeing.
Okay. I may have more questions, Mr. Chair, but I'll give my colleagues an opportunity. Thank you so much for answering my question, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Anwar. Representative Callahan.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for being here this morning, sir. In your opinion, having spent time inside correctional facilities in Connecticut, without some option for segregated housing, and you're right, often the term solitary is widely used when that's not necessarily the case. Without an option for some form of segregated housing, would staff and other inmates be placed at greater risk, do you feel?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that last part?
Would staff or excuse me, other inmates in general population be at greater risk if the option of some form of segregated housing wasn't available?
That I do agree with. I do agree that the general population would be at greater risk of harm if certain individuals were not able to be removed and placed in segregation. There are inmates that go to segregation for their own safety, but also for the safety of the vast majority of the population.
Well, thank you. And that's my only question. And I appreciate you offering to volunteer your time and coming in this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Callahan. Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, I'm going to say Mr. Callahan, but that's not what I meant to say, Mr. Capoli, for being with us today. I just want to go back to the correctional counselor. I'm just wondering, is that something that's been newly created within the corrections department, or if it's been around? And if so, for how long?
So correctional counselor training has been around for some time. It's the initial stepping stone for individuals that want to be counselor, but don't have the full background to complete the full spectrum of tasks of a counselor. My experience in corrections has been solely as an officer. So I was not eligible to be a full counselor, but I was eligible to be a counselor trainee based on my experience and my education. So I would be a counselor trainee for 1 year, where I trained directly underneath counselor supervisors and full counselors, where they go over with a fine-tooth comb everything that is expected of me and everything that I am to be doing on a daily basis.
So your criteria is basically, in order to get into this training program, you just have to have had the desire to be a counselor and also be a correctional officer. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. So you don't have to be a correctional officer. A college degree is really the main focus of the requirements for it. It is posted on the internet for anyone to view. I do believe the posting will be coming back out again soon. For me, I was able to get in because it was open to state agency only. So I was able to get in while being an officer. I believe the next go around when it is open will be open to the general public, where you don't have to be a correctional officer to be a trainee. I hope that answers.
Well, I do have a clarifying question. Do you or do you not have you say it's a degree program? You have a degree in counseling or social work or anything of that nature?
Yes, I have a bachelor's degree, and my coursework is in criminal justice, psychology, and sociology.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Thank you. And then the other question I had was around SEG. You know, we're talking a lot about segregation, solitary confinement, whatever you want to call it. Have you seen in the 7 years that you served as a correctional officer that SEG has made a better inmate?
I wouldn't necessarily say make a better inmate. That could be used differently. I would say that it would encourage an inmate to seek help in different ways rather than lashing out. Try and speak first rather than use actions. I have seen those changes where an inmate will act out and land themselves in segregation, and then while they're there, they use that time to review what they've done and speak to, whether it's the line officers or mental health clinicians or medical. They take that time to speak to people and figure out better avenues to get help.
And have you seen the opposite occur as well?
That's hard to say. There are inmates that go to seg and they are just constantly in and out, and I can't speak to why they do that. I truly don't have the training in mental health to pinpoint why they go in and out of segregation so often.
Well, I think there's actually data that supports why that happens. So if someone is looking to be a correctional counselor, that should definitely be some of the information that you seek so that you can really serve these inmates in a way that they deserve, because there's a lot of data to support that this is exactly what Dr. Anwar stated at the onset of the question. It is detrimental to mental health.
Yes.
And I thank you again for being with us today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Porter. Comment, question from members of the committee. Comment or question. I do have one question. I think it's only one question. Never know how these things go. What made you want to do the counseling work?
I didn't have much interest in it in the beginning of my career. After losing my brother 2 years ago, I wanted to do something more in my career to prevent this from possibly happening to other people and to prevent inmates when they are released from doing worse crimes. If I could talk to somebody and stop them from progressing from a car theft to a murder, if I could do that once in my career, I feel like that's a win.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sapoli. Thank you for being willing to serve.
Thank you for having me.
We will next hear from, I think Scott Semple is unavailable. We'll next hear from Rena Kapoor.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Senator Winfield. Thanks very much for allowing me to speak with you today. I am a psychiatrist. I work for the Yale School of Medicine, and I have spent my now almost 20 years of my career working with people who have serious mental illness, who are involved with the criminal justice system. So it's my hope that I can bring some of that experience and knowledge to the work of this committee. I have provided direct clinical care, so seeing patients in the Department of Correction here in Connecticut from 2009 to 2011. I worked at both the Bridgeport Correctional Center and at Garner. For about 5 years after that, I worked with the same patient population, but after they had been discharged or released from corrections and treating them in the community. And then for the last several years, I have worked in the high security hospital setting, again, with people who have serious mental illness and are involved with the criminal justice system. I also have some scholarly and research interests and expertise in the psychological effects of solitary confinement, as well as providing culturally competent care in correctional healthcare settings. And then I have worked also as a consultant to prison and jail systems in a number of other states to help them sort of deal with some of the difficult questions about how you really implement well-meaning ideas, for example, reducing solitary confinement. So that's the gist of what I've done and what I bring to the committee. And I see there are questions already, so I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Senator Kissel.
Oh, you're muted, Senator?
Yeah, I gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And Doctor, you had mentioned that part of your research or your experience is going to Garner, or at least getting information from Garner. And to one of the previous nominees, I had said that I've toured Garner and I've been very much aware of this ongoing. Garner tends to be where a lot of mental health inmates go. Just like I have facilities up here in North Central Connecticut where a lot of the older inmates go, just because they're more equipped for illnesses that may befall someone in their senior years. And part of the issue was that tension between a medical approach, heightening concerns regarding mental health issues, and correctional officers who do not dismiss that, but they're concerned about keeping order within the facility, not just for themselves, the corrections officers maintaining the facility and overseeing it, but also quite often these inmates that are having these mental health issues are a danger to other inmates. They may explode in like the lunchroom or something like that, or also be a danger to themselves. And I'm just wondering what's your well-informed approach to issues where there's sort of this tension between, you know, trying to maintain safety and order versus erring on the side, not erring, but sort of focusing on the side of mental health, which may include a greater latitude regarding freedom of motion or not being in a cell for a certain period of time?
So, I mean, every case is different, I guess, is what I would say. But I do think in general, you know, the important part is that the mental health professionals and the security professionals communicate with each other about why things are being done or recommended. And I also, like, I believe fundamentally that if you don't have a basic sense of safety in your facility, then like nothing good is going to come from that if the officers don't feel safe and the mental health professionals don't feel safe. So, you know, I think the trick is to try and get to that point where you can all agree that improving health and mental health is actually in the service of improving safety for the facility. And in my experience, there are very rare cases where those two things are absolutely at odds and you can't find some kind of common ground about how to handle a particular case.
I really like that answer, and I find it very reassuring because I agree as well. I have high hopes for all of you folks. I think talking across, you know, lines of experience will be a great benefit. You know, what can be gleaned from just analyzing data shouldn't be minimized, but at the same time, nothing really can replace boots on the ground and being in a facility, even if it's just for 24 hours, to sort of see the ebbs and flows and how things work. And there might be issues regarding meal times, or there may be issues regarding showers, and there may be issues just, you know, I've walked through so many facilities, just if someone crosses the middle line in the hallway, does that start a whole fight or what? I don't know. And like another panelist had indicated that, you know, we can't minimize the impact of the outside world. We tend to look at corrections facilities as just isolated islands. And as Mr. Bowen indicated, and I believe others would agree, that, you know, getting bad news from home, I'm getting, you know, getting divorced, or problems with your children as far as interaction, things that we can do as a legislature as far as enhancing things that work and maybe opening paths that had not been thought of. So I think this offers itself a lot of possibilities. And the fact that you think that your position is, I think, a very healthy one, that there shouldn't have been a turf battle within Garner, right? And yet for years there was. And I think part of the problem was communication. And it's not as much a turf battle, but a lack of communication. And the notion that we can do things better without necessarily impinging or reducing safety, I think that's the ultimate goal. And I think there's always room for improvement. So I think your sort of balanced approach, and that's what I'm gleaning right now, is very healthy. I'm not going to nominate you to chair this group, but I like the way it's going. Thank you very much. That turned into my little diatribe, but the chair knows I have to do that at least once a meeting. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. Senator Anwar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I almost forgot what I asked. No, I'm just joking. So I just wanted to thank you, Dr. Kapoor, for your willingness to serve in this capacity, and thank you for the work that you are doing. I think this will bring a lot of value in your advisory capacity, because prisons are not psych units in psychiatric hospitals. And unfortunately, that is sometimes what is happening. Is it's a failure of systems that have resulted in individuals being in these prisons where appropriate treatment can allow them to be very functional. So having that lens is going to bring value and bring some balance in understanding and broader public health management. So I just wanted to ask you if you had insight into what percentage of individuals have untreated psychiatric issues that land in the prison system, and also if you could add how many of DDS clients end up doing that too.
Okay. So the number that you will hear kind of thrown about from earlier studies about how many people in prisons have a serious mental illness is somewhere around 15 to 20%. But those are very different based on gender. So women, it's more like 75, 80%, and men more like 10 to 15%. But I will say that I'm actually also working with the Connecticut Sentencing Commission right now on looking at that issue specifically in Connecticut's prisons. And what we've found is that there is a much higher prevalence of mental illness in Connecticut, even than those numbers. So when you look at sort of a combined who has a mental illness, who has a substance use disorder that requires treatment right now, or has had that in the past, you know, you're upwards of 90% of the prison population. So there's a huge kind of unmet need.
Thank you. I truly appreciate your presence there, hopefully, and the work that you do and the value that you'll bring. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Anwar. Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Kapoor, for being with us and considering this responsibility. In the years that you were inside working in your capacity as a psychiatrist, can you tell me how available were mental health services to incarcerated people?
So my experience was working in Bridgeport Correctional Center, and that was mostly sort of like seeing people who are on incarceration day one, being screened for mental illness, and then anyone who's sort of so acutely ill that they needed a infirmary level of care, taking care of those folks, and I guess I would say my experience was that the screening process works fairly well that everyone's seen by a social worker or a nurse. Medications are they try to confirm them with the pharmacy in the community to get people those things. I think the long-term care was more of a challenge. Like once you've identified someone as needing mental health care, then what do you do? And I think that even though I think the popular perception is that, oh, everybody gets medicated in prison just to keep them quiet, my experience was more the opposite of that, is that people were asking for care for conditions that they were in treatment for in the community and weren't able to access it because of, the same kind of staffing shortages and things that plague facilities and healthcare settings everywhere.
And could you speak to the same question at Garner?
I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you.
Garner, did you serve at Garner CI as well? Is that
I
correct?
did, yes. So
I'm just
that's like, my experience was that they provide good comprehensive mental health care, but that's for the 250 incarcerated people who have been identified as needing that level of care. So 250 out of, 10,000 or so people in our correctional system. So I think it's not that Garner provides bad care by any means. I just think there are probably more people who could use that who don't have access to it.
Yeah, thank you for making that point, because incarceration is extremely traumatic. And I think it is for everyone, not just for incarcerated people, but for everyone that has to work in that setting. My last question through you, Mr. Chair, is you spoke about safety and effectiveness of treatment and how safe, the incarcerated people, the workers, et cetera, officers feel. As someone that worked in Garner, someone that worked at Bridgeport jail, can you tell me how safe did you feel when you were working in those facilities?
I'm not sure this is the answer you're going to want to hear, but
I want to hear the truth, so please tell me the truth.
No, I mean, I would tell people, like I tell my students who are considering working in corrections, that I feel safer as a psychiatrist in that environment than I do in your average emergency room. And that's because the environment is aware, it's designed around the idea that there are safety risks, and there's no shortage of big burly guys who want to come to your rescue at a moment's notice when you work in corrections. That's not the case in the emergency room when you're kind of out there by yourself as the doctor. That being said, there were definitely lots of times where I thought that incarcerated people were treated in a way, sort of by officers or sometimes even by healthcare staff, sort of harshly or to maintain safety in a way that I thought there was probably a better way to go about it. I guess, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and I thank you for that. And I would just want to ask this as a result of what you just said. Would you describe that treatment as being inhumane?
There were certainly things that I saw that I would, give me pause, that I certainly would describe as inhumane. But I'd also say that the vast majority of what I saw was people trying to do the best they could with inadequate resources, and sometimes with inadequate training about how to do it better.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Porter. Representative Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Doctor, for taking the time to be here. I too have spent time in every correctional institution in Connecticut and as part of my old job, and they are very stressful places. Bridgeport Correctional, especially because, as you said, people are coming in for the first time, and many pending cases are housed there. You mentioned earlier in your testimony here today that there's what percentage of people who are being triaged coming into a place like BCC were reporting mental health problems?
So I don't know specifically about BCC, the gist of it numbers, somewhere like 15-20% of people who are incarcerated around the country But I don't know specifically about Bridgeport.
Okay, I think the gist of my question is, Doctor, that having even me going there doing a pre-sentence investigation interview, my anxiety level goes through the roof because I'm sitting in with general population doing interviews. If I was being processed to stay there for any length of time, I would say my anxiety level would be sky high. Now, someone like that being triaged and they report to whoever's doing the triage that they have extreme anxiety and depression, would that be considered, go down in the books as a mental health problem? Because I would think everyone stepping in the door would report some degree of anxiety and depression walking in there, being separated from their families.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that, and there certainly is a fair amount of that. I would say it's also a little more complicated in that some people have been there before. Some people have a bunch of family members or community members who are already there. They know what it's about, or they've been incarcerated in other countries or in Puerto Rico, and coming to Bridgeport Correctional was not the most stressful day of their life, believe it or not. So I do think it varies from person to person about what their response is going to be in those first few moments or first few days of incarceration. But the important part to me as a mental health professional is that we have the resources and the time to actually sit down with those people and assess, is this a major depressive disorder? Is this, just adjusting to the facility? And that we also then can provide them with follow-up care to say, you know what, you are really stressed out right now. That's an understandable response. And so why don't you come and check back in tomorrow and we'll see where this is going, and oftentimes those things, because of resource limitations, sometimes can't be done the way that they should be. Yeah.
Well, Doctor, thank you for answering my question, and thanks for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Callahan. Comment or question from other members of the committee? Comment or question? Seeing none, thank you very much for volunteering to serve.
Thank you.
Darryl McGraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, members of the committee. Honor and a privilege to be here. Many of you I know from different works and different spaces. It was really difficult to listen to a lot of answers today, so hopefully I feel I'll be able to bring lived experience to the table. Having been incarcerated, having been a person who's been in solitary confinement numerous times, and never because I was having a hard time, never under investigation, didn't follow a direct order, have been in Bridgeport Correctional institution when I lived in Stanford, and that was a very difficult place to do time. Also been an organizer for Stop Solitary Confinement. Those of you that know me, I've been an advocate and an activist for a very long time because this is a passion of mine. And I sit here and I speak for those brothers and sisters that are still behind the wall right now suffering. And the one thing that made this attractive to me, and I'm honored to be nominated, and if for no other reason, being able to talk about having written an ombudsman while incarcerated and never getting a response, never ever getting a response. And I believe that individuals that are inside and those of us that have done our time and now are formally incarcerated individuals, and I would like to, if nothing else, that we continue to consider and talk about people as individuals, whether they're incarcerated or formally incarcerated. Terms like prisoners and so on and so forth, we got to get past that and still always look at people as human beings because they are people's children, brothers, sisters, fathers, and so on and so forth. I don't want to preach to the choir, but every time I hear derogatory language describing those individuals that are incarcerated, it makes me cringe because it feels like you're talking about me as well. I just think that this is definitely, I'm excited that this is happening in our state again, but I really would hope, man, I would love to see it of a person with lived experience have this position. Someone that would answer those calls, that are going to be able to check in with people, because it is more than solitary confinement. There's a ton of things going on. There's deaths that happen every day. There are medical issues that are going unaddressed, and having an opportunity to work with corrections and having that ability to work with individuals who are open-minded. You know, that we've had some great conversations when Commissioner Semple and others were in charge. So I'm going to stop there, seeing a hand. Those that know me know I can talk. So I will stop there, but it's an honor and a privilege to be in the space.
All right, thank you. Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. McGraw, for being with us today. I do want to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, just expounding a little bit on your experience of what solitary confinement in the state of Connecticut is like, as someone who has that lived experience, because we've heard a lot today about what it isn't and what it is. And I think you would be the best one to speak to what it is.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I was in solitary confinement for 14 days under investigation for having a weapon when I was in a level 2, which was not mine. At the 14 days, I was told, oh yeah, it wasn't you. You can go back to your cell. There wasn't a lot of rec going on. I heard there was a discussion about rec. There were opportunities to be rec, but as we know, and those of you that are familiar with the Department of Corrections, when they're short-staffed or somebody doesn't want to go, you know, if a CO doesn't want to give you a shower, then that doesn't happen. And there's no one to call. There's none of that. I mean, I can go into, and I'm not here to bash the Department of Corrections, but the reality of some of the things that were said by people who have never been in solitary confinement is almost offensive. When I was in Bridgeport Correctional, I was housed in solitary confinement in my underwear. You know what I mean? And it was very hot, and many of these jails are old, right? So they don't have air conditioning and the luxury, some of the things that happen. So you don't forget these things when they happen to you, you know, and you can just be put in solitary confinement for not following an order. It is a sense of control. And however you decide to call it, we could switch the names, we could call it this, we could call it that. It's still separating individuals from human contact. And that's the thing that we need to be talking about. And how are we treating people, and are we treating our people that are incarcerated as human beings? Because mind you, by no way, when I was sentenced, did the judge say you will be sentenced to 5 years of inhumane treatment. That wasn't anyone, and I don't believe anyone. I have family members and friends that are hired in the Department of Corrections, and when you get hired, they say you get hired in this job as a CO, corrections counselor, or whatever, and you get to dehumanize individuals. That's not part of the job. So hopefully, together as a community, we can start addressing those issues.
Now, during your time at SEC, were you ever afforded the opportunity for counseling, or to speak to a reverend, a pastor, a priest, an imam?
Every once in a while, there'd be a walkthrough, right? And maybe the imam or the pastor comes through, but it wasn't like I said, hey, could we, those opportunities I've never seen in my experience of 10 years in the Department of Corrections on another side of the fence. I've never seen the luxury of being able to request those types of assistance. They'll say, we'll see if medical comes by, we'll see. And never, while I was in solitary confinement, have I ever had a CO just come and shoot the breeze with me. Not saying that it doesn't happen, it just never happened for me or anyone that I seen in that capacity. I'll just mention that I worked in Bridgeport Hospital as a worker. And the other thing I'll just add to the resume is that I also was a peer worker inside the facility. So when an incident would happen, a lot of times the CO would say, hey, why don't you go talk to that guy? So it was more peer workers doing this work. And I did that for 3.5 years. So it was more in 3 different facilities. It was more peer workers doing that one-on-one contact. And just to add really quickly, we need to understand that there are many people, when you understand culture, many people, Black and brown people, do not seek mental health attention because of the stigma. So I appreciate the doctor mentioning the numbers, because the numbers are vastly skewed, because many people, because of the stigma within the system, do not seek mental health treatment.
Thank you,
Mr. Being long-winded.
Thank you, Mr. McGraw. And my final question for you, Mr. Chair, did SEG, your time at SEG, make you a better incarcerated individual?
Absolutely not. It disappointed me, because the 2 times that I ended up there, It wasn't due to I was acting out. Anybody checks my correctional institutional record, I'm not a person, I'm old school, so I know how to follow the rules. These were incidents that I was being brought there, accosted, if you will, put in segregation until an investigation and or something, but it never made me do better. Actually, we all know it only takes 30 days for your mental health to start to deteriorate. In 14 days, I was already talking to myself and having hallucinations that I was in a club on the street versus being out. And I had never reported having any mental health issues. And I'll just add that we cannot negate the fact of trauma, whether being traumatized from the outside or being traumatized inside. If anything, going to segregation for me was more traumatizing, because if I can be so graphic, every time you go to segregation, you're being strip searched in front of at least 10 officers. And my one time for going to segregation, I was strip searched while a female videotaped me being strip searched. And that's probably the closest thing I've ever felt to us being a slave.
Thank you, Mr. McGraw, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Porter. Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McGraw, for wanting to serve and using your life experience to help us do better in the system. A couple of questions. You had mentioned Commissioners or former Commissioner Semple.
Yes, sir.
One of my favorite individuals for a variety of reasons. And I knew him and worked with him, not in corrections, but as a legislator for decades. Unfortunately, it appears that he couldn't be with us here today. But as someone who worked his way up through the Department of Corrections, I think that benefited him as a commissioner, just and I don't want to, please don't take this as a disparagement of other commissioners, but currently we have Commissioner Kairos, and he worked his way up through the system as well. And I think that just gives them better outlook on exactly what's going on. And yeah, I'm a little biased for homegrown through Connecticut, but we just have a way of doing things that may not be the same in other states. So my first question, Mr. McGraw, is you seem like you have high respect for former Commissioner Semple as well. And I'm just guessing that you don't see his experience, having spent his career in the Connecticut Department of Corrections, as a pure negative, but that can probably bring a lot of insights as we try to move the system forward. Would that be fair, or am I wrong?
Oh, no, it's good to see you, Senator Kissel. I will say that all my dealings with former Commissioner Semple have always been pleasant. He has always been, open to listening. And when we disagreed, we could have a disagreement, right? I mean, there's times that we disagree with different things, especially when we first started talking about solitary confinement. But I can say in my experience, I haven't got to work with Commissioner Kairos as much as I would like to as of yet. But I will say from my lived experience working with Commissioner Semple has always been open-minded, always listening to those individuals, always invited people like myself, formerly incarcerated individuals, to the table to have those discussions. And that I appreciate. So I can say that all my dealings with Commissioner Semple have been pleasant.
Great. And I hope that's the same with the nominees that work in corrections or had worked in corrections that were before us earlier today as well, because I have super high hopes, as I indicated to the good doctor from Yale earlier, that this is a great group. And I think by the intermingling of different perspectives, we're going to get the best product. I think that is the case in the legislature, and I think that's the case here. My second question, though, and I want to commend you, because I think of all the folks that we've spoken to today, you really hit the nail on the head. And it's broader than corrections, but it's definitely super important. And our nominee, Mr. Bowen, sort of talked about this a little bit. I think we as a state and probably we as a nation did a huge disservice when we totally shut down all the facilities for folks with mental health needs. And we didn't really set up any major program to address it on the outside, right? I mean, I would be the first to say Mansfield Training School, I bumped into it when I was a young student at UConn, and it was just crazy. And I understand why facilities like that shut down. But at the same time, we threw the ball, but we had no one to catch the ball. And to this day, I think there's folks that have needs that end up in the criminal justice system and they don't belong there, but there's nothing else out there in society that can be the safety net. And I'm really hopeful that our initiatives regarding young people address their mental health needs so that they don't use, the criminal justice system as their safety valve, because that's just going to create a record and if not ruin their lives, certainly not help it in a positive and productive way. And the thing you said that just struck me like you were ringing a bell, and the thing that Mr. Bowen said is sometimes people, when offered mental health treatment or counseling or services, they'd rather just talk to a CO or another inmate. And there's a stigma. There's a stigma outside the Department of Corrections, and there is a stigma within the Department of Corrections. And so we as legislators can get all sorts of resources. And I think we've heard enough this morning to say we are lacking in a lot of things that should be available. But how, in your opinion, can we break this stigma of seeking mental health treatment? So you want to displace, to the greatest extent possible, solitary confinement or administrative segregation. I get it. But if the answer to that in part is mental health treatment, counseling, services, something, how do we dispel the stigma? Otherwise, we'll set up a system and folks just won't take advantage of it.
Well, I mean, and I appreciate the question. There's so many times, I mean, this is a bigger conversation, and we're not even talking about once we go back to trauma again, but we also have to identify that people that are coming into the system are already traumatized, broken, and many times you end up in the system based off of survival, right? So if you don't understand where people come from, it's impossible for us to try to address the needs of people if we don't understand where they're coming from or how these issues even take place. What I will say is I heard Mr. Bowen say something about how the corrections officers have a hotline that they could call and they could connect with people for their peers. I like that idea. I hope that he brings that to the table and makes it that we can have a hotline for when I'm having a hard time in prison. Is there a number that I can call and talk to somebody with lived experience on the outside when I'm overwhelmed, I've lost somebody? One of those places where I could talk to somebody who has the lived experience, who understands what it's like to lose a loved one when incarcerated, what it understands when you break up with your girlfriend and so on and so forth, where people are triggered. There's been many a times where I had been called as a peer mentor to someone who was thinking possibly even, upset and really depressed. And that conversation switched into, listen, bro, this is what it is. By no means are we trying to negate our professionals, our mental health professionals, but there is a lag. There's a lag in that space as well. So I think that we need to be, it's twofold. If I could say, we need to really be looking at how do we empower those individuals with lived experience to help this process. And the last thing I'll say is, as a country, not only a state, we do a really good job of locking people up. But one of the things we haven't mastered is how to transition individuals home, right? So all these things happen to individuals while they're incarcerated, and then they're just let go, right? Someone mentioned the True Unit, but there's no warm handoff after the True Unit. There's no warm handoff. There's somebody right now as we speak has their bags packed and they're going to get dropped off downtown and they're going to be forced to figure it out, right? That in itself is challenging. Yeah. I would challenge anyone to try to service amount of time and then get out with a plastic bag and they tell you to figure it out on a cold day like today.
No, I hear you. And speaking with retired Officer Bowen, you know, and a lot of these things come from the grassroots up. I mean, my understanding is that he and some fellow officers saw a need, the union helped, and it was nothing that came out of the legislature, it was nothing that came out of the administration. It didn't come down from on high, but you know, one CO saw another CO, and like, you know, there's suicidal ideations, there's alcoholism, there's drug abuse. Some of these facilities, especially Northern, I'm sure you're familiar, they're designed to make you feel depressed and down. Yeah, that's a great idea. I understand conceptually why they came up with that, but having toured that facility many times, I can't imagine working in it or living in it. It's just, you know, when the whole architecture is designed to make you feel small and powerless, that's not a good thing for going back into society. So I think you're exactly right, Mr. McGraw. We have three sort of windows. We have the pre-entering into the justice system, within the justice system, whether it's in lockup or whether it's in, you know, you've been sentenced. And then you said like the handoff back into the functioning society. And my goal as a legislator, as a legislator rather, yeah, I believe in law and order, especially for the serious felony offenders, you know, but they're the minority. 90% of the folks are going back out into society. I want to break that cycle of recidivism. I don't want it to happen prior thereto. That's why I think focusing on the young people is so important. But also you hit the nail on the head once again by saying we try to have a good handoff back into society. But if you really don't have a lot there for you, first of all, it's just physically scary. Like, where am I going to sleep tonight? You know, they don't want me to be in a homeless shelter. What am I going to do? And eventually all those like little handoffs, even if it's a halfway house, they run out. And so now what? So there's a lot of things that we have to focus on. And I think you bring a very unique perspective. I appreciate your advocacy. I know where you're coming from, but I think having sort of cross-pollination from a bunch of individuals with different perspectives is going to give us the best result. And I love your idea that maybe what, you know, Officer Bowen worked on with his colleagues, maybe we're lacking something like that, like a hotline. Or, you know, we went out of this thing and I disagreed about the free telephone calls, but if there's no one to talk to on the outside, what good is that? If there was something where if something bad happens, you're getting divorced, you're losing your ex-wife is taking your children to like Texas and you're not going to see them. All this kind of stuff that can just flip a switch and make you want to act out, because what are you going to do? Maybe we need, as opposed to a person coming to visit, which may or may not happen in the next week, some sort of hotline that's 24/7, 365. So you get immediate, hey, this just landed in my lap. I need to deal with it right now. That's just one idea that we've came up with just talking today. Put you guys in a room for a number of months, and I'm just going to be excited to see what you folks come up with. So thank you for wanting to give back after having gone through all the stuff you have in your life. I think that's real important. And again, your perspective is unique. And I just want to thank you for coming out. And if you have anything else to say, that would be great. But I really like your perspective and your notion that, yeah, we got to get rid of this stigmatism about mental health needs, but maybe we can call it something else and slide it in and get the same result or even better.
Senator Kissel, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. We've had these conversations back and forth before, and they've always ended like this. So once again, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. Representative Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's still morning. Good morning, Mr. McGraw. Nice to see you. You were the chair, I believe, of the Police Accountability Task Force. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And I mean, we didn't have like a debriefing session. How was that experience for you?
That was a great experience. It was an opportunity to work with law enforcement in a different capacity, right? You know, me being a formerly incarcerated person and now working with police chiefs from all over the state, and having this opportunity to once again bring lived experience. When we put stuff on the table, we didn't always agree, but being able to say, I know what it's like to be assaulted by law enforcement. I know what it's like to feel like you're going to lose your life at that time. I know what that's like, but I also know what it's like to have pleasant interactions with law enforcement as well. And explaining what it's like to be a person of color that's always in de-escalation mode when interacting with law enforcement. So I feel like, those interactions, I felt like through that, what started out as something small, we lasted 2 years. We were actually able to get some recommendations through. And I felt like, under my leadership, which was cool, like to be in that seat and actually have people, being able to guide the committee in a way that I felt like we could have got some more done. I would have loved for us to really have worked on, the issues of use of force, but we didn't get to do that. And hopefully there's another space to do that. But I felt like a lot of things that we did get to do and the conversations we have were fruitful, not only for the group, but we were able to invite community members in and actually hear their voices and hear about mothers with kids with autism and what young people felt about their interactions with law enforcement. So I actually believe that it was an opportunity to hear from the community in a way that we have never done before.
Thank you. I also, Senator Kissel had asked you about your life experience, and you certainly talked about that at length. I just wanted to ask you, in your experience, you talked about somebody being dropped off on, a bus today, downtown Hartford, whatever. Figure it out. In your experience, when somebody is, let's say, ordered parole,
yes,
they're going to be let out early,
right,
unexpected. What is the time period from that action to actually being let out?
Well, we could see it could shift differently. Somebody could go to court today, right? Let's just not even say court. Let's say the person has been incarcerated all this time, and all of a sudden the judge says, you know what? Time served or something like that. That person is released. A person in parole like that may have a parole date, but didn't, for whatever reason, they get this parole date and they think their mother's house is going to work, but that doesn't work or something falls through. They still get released, right? They end up being released. And that individual, or they may think, this is why I encourage if I'm mentoring somebody to have a plan A, B, C, and D, and you might even need an E because things change, right? I mean, things change and you can't go to certain places. So those time periods can be different for each individual. I've always advocated that reentry begins at the beginning of the sentence and not the end. And this is where we're doing a disservice, waiting 60 to 90 days to address people's issues that are going back into the community, when we should be, if I come in homeless, if I get arrested and I'm homeless, I'm probably going to be homeless a year, 5 years, 6 months, whatever. I'm going to be homeless then. So why aren't we addressing these issues in the early parts of the sentence so we know that our citizens, our people are going back to our communities, their needs are going to be met when they return, and it's not going to be all of a sudden he's homeless or he's struggling or he has to lie about where he's going to live because he wants to be free. He or she wants to be free. So there's really not a time period because it can be different for every individual.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just comparing your experiences in Connecticut. I'm aware of a case in another state that I'm involved with where the young man has been in jail for 10 years, actually 11. And he was recently granted parole, and it's his second time, and it was successful. But he's not going to be released until June. To give him that period. And I'm just trying to figure out, in your experience, if is it a 90-day provision here in Connecticut, or
it could be? I mean, that would be for the DOC to answer, because it could be, say that guy's getting out, say he's eligible for parole in June, but he doesn't get a bed until May, April. So now he's only got 2 months really to gather his stuff together and get ready to go out. It takes, especially anyone with a criminal record, it's going to take you more time to find a job, right? So, and then the halfway houses want you to find a job. So there's a ton of stuff that goes wrong with the way our system is set up right now. Because if I go to Groton and I'm really from New Haven, but you want me to get a job because I'm in a halfway house, I'm going to get a job at McDonald's. But guess what? When my parole date comes up, I'm going to quit that job and I'm going to go back to New Haven, right? So not only does the business lose an employee, this person goes back to New Haven and has to start all over again. So there's so much that we could be doing in the earlier parts of the sentence. So when that parole date comes up, these issues are not even a problem, you know?
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
There was a
I mean, I
couple-
love to talk to you more about it in any space.
Yeah, no problem. There was a couple of things that you mentioned, though, in your introductory remarks. So you said something about that you were continually in solitary confinement, but then later on, you said during the term of your incarceration that you went to solitary or SEG twice. How long was your sentence?
So I was in solitary confinement that I can remember, and I spent 10 years of my life in and out of the correctional system. I can remember going to solitary confinement 3 or 4 times, and I can initiate. The one time was for a weapon. I had moved into a dorm, and the person who had the bed before me, had a weapon taped under the locker. I would have never known that. When the guard went around, he had a mirror, he looked and he found this weapon. It took 14 days to find out that wasn't my weapon. Another time I had a Walkman, I was playing it too loud. And I'm dating myself using the term Walkman, but those of you that remember what a Walkman is, and it was playing through the headphones. The person asked for me to turn it down. I didn't hear him. He said, take him to SEG. I went to segregation in Bridgeport and I stayed there 7 days with no ticket. So those are the times that I can remember going there. On no fight. I've never had a fight in the Department of Corrections. I've never had a fight. There's many different reasons that I went to segregation, but it was never because I was having a mental health breakdown. It was never because I assaulted a CO or anything like that. These were all incidents that could have been rectified through either a conversation or a loss of rec or something like that. But I actually was separated and put in a solitary cell. And I know that several people mentioned that you have a cellie, not all the time, because when I was in Corrigan cell, oh yeah, that was for refusing housing. I was in Corrigan segregation because they were utilizing the gym as a dormitory and it looked like Katrina in there. And this is something that the ombudsman probably could address or at least should hear about, where it was like Katrina and I had just went to commissary and they had no place for you to lock your stuff up. And I said, listen, man, I'm an old guy, old school number. Can I go back to APOD? They said, no, you're going to stay here, which was over 100 people in the unit. And I said, well, I don't really want to stay here, man, because I'm worried about my stuff. And they said, you know what? Sounds like you're refusing housing. And that's how I ended up in segregation that time, because I refused to sleep in a boat on the floor in the gym instead of, I wanted to go back to a cell where my stuff, and I felt like I was safe. There was 110 people in the gym and I did not feel like I was safe. And not only not safe, I did not want to have to hurt someone or be hurt over my belongings. So these are the times that I ended up in segregation. And that was the time that I was videotaped. Each time I was videotaped naked, stripped naked and videotaped, which is customary when you go to segregation. And this particular time I was videotaped by a female officer, which had never happened before. So dehumanizing, I can't even tell you, dignity, all of that gone.
Understood. And the other thing that you mentioned, you were talking about our current conditions in our prisons. And I wrote down, and I quote, you said that deaths are happening every day. What were you referring to?
Well, people are dying in the system every day. There were 2 deaths recently, one today, and then there was one, I believe, last week in one of our correctional facilities. I'm not going to speak on those. I mean, you could check with the Department of Corrections how many people die in their facilities on a regular basis, whether it be overdoses or natural causes. But this is happening on a regular basis. So people die. And then unfortunate is someone recently died in what we call, in pretrial status. So people are dying, not even sentenced. So I get a life sentence. We already know how bad it was with COVID, but I come in for a shoplifting charge or a burglary and end up not going home. So,
Understood. And I'm concerned, up until about 6 months ago when there was a death in one of our facilities, the Department of Corrections would reach out to myself and Senator Kissel and the chairs of this committee and let us know. And I have not been informed of the situation, so I will be following up. But similarly, we were informed last year that 2 inmates died of overdoses in their cell.
I would encourage you to check on that, because there are several. To my knowledge, I have an ear. I would like to say, like, what I have an ear to the street, and I have family members that work in the system, and also people that are in the system who have already relayed to me that 2 people recently died in the system. So I don't know if they haven't gotten that information to you, but I would encourage you, and I really appreciate the work that you and Senator Winfield do, because we need to keep an eye on these situations, because it's unfortunate. And I said this in my text today. Wow, it's unfortunate that a person lost their life in a county jail. It's not even prison. You're just in jail. You know what I mean?
I agree. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for your willingness to serve.
Appreciate you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Fishbone. Senator Champagne.
Thank you. Mr. McGraw, thank you for coming in and wanting to step up today. Your experience could be very valuable.
Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a couple questions. Number one, do you believe that solitary confinement should be completely eliminated in Connecticut?
I believe that it should be revamped. If they're going to utilize that system, then when you bring a person into solitary confinement, you should have every tool accessible for that individual to find out why the individual is either acting out or having a hard time, not just separating somebody and then not addressing the issues and then hoping that they're going to get better. The other thing is that what we miss is that, do you know, if I go to solitary confinement and I have 5 days left before I go home, or if I've been in solitary confinement for 30 days or what have you, and I get released, it's time for me to go home. Do you know they don't contact my family? They don't contact the community and say, hey, Mr. McGraw was in solitary confinement for this amount of time. We might want to keep an eye on him because he has had very little human contact within the last 7 to 30 days. This is not information that is related to our communities. And so an individual who may be going home or returning may may need a little bit more help than that. So Mike, to answer your question, sorry for being long-winded about it, but this is an issue that we all should be concerned about, is that if we're going to have if we're going to have anything that's remotely called solitary confinement, which I don't like the term, we should be saying that these are the people who need the most help. So therefore, there should be mentoring, there should be interactions with psychiatrists and so on and so forth. So when that individual does return to the unit or back to the community, they're in better shape than they were before. That hasn't been my experience. People usually come out worse. And I will say that sometimes some people, their mental health is so bad that they would rather be in solitary confinement because they don't want to be around all these individuals, because that could be an overwhelming situation.
So I didn't quite get your answer.
I'm not going to say that. I believe that if it's done, I believe that it should be done differently. And
from what we've understood, it is done differently now. But do you believe that an individual who assaults a corrections officer belongs in solitary confinement?
I believe there's times that an individual needs to be separated for one reason or another. But I don't believe that the dehumanizing system that we have currently is effective.
Okay. And obviously I understand the strip search part. I don't understand why a female was present. Hopefully that never occurs again. But there's certain circumstances where you get people that assault prison guards. Mm-hmm. And then what happens if the counselor goes in and gets assaulted? How many people get assaulted before you say, okay, this person needs to be separated? Right. And those are the ones I'm talking about. I'm not talking about somebody's Walkman being loud. Yeah. Now, obviously, I only have one side of the stories here, but when we deal with this, we have to understand public safety comes number one.
100%.
Right. And once we forget that and we pass arbitrary rules or whatever, and we eliminate the fact for public safety, there's a problem there. And
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. If somebody's violent and it needs to be separated from the community, I mean, I don't want to be hurt, nor do I want anybody that I was housed with hurt. I've met a lot of people in there that have some very challenging issues that could benefit from a lot more mental health treatment than just being separated. The problem doesn't go away because you're separating them. They're just being, and a lot of times, and I'll just say this, and I appreciate your question, Senator Champagne, is the fact that the tool that they're using a lot of times is to just separate individuals who may be a problem or who may not be following a rule. It's a funny thing called structure, right? We have this thing called structure, but if I grew up in a house with no structure and I've never been around taught structure, yet I go to a system that's built on structure, and you want me to follow those rules. It's hard. We need to teach people structure. It's not something that just happens.
Just before Senator Champagne jumped back in, I think you almost stepped on Senator Champagne, and I know your answer was responsive. Just try to be careful about responding before a question.
Yes, sir. My bad if I did that. I'm very passionate about the topic.
Well, and I can tell. But the other part is you also have to keep order in a prison, because once you eliminate order, once you eliminate a punishment that should be the last resort, and that's what solitary confinement should be. It should be the last resort, and nobody should go there unless they've breached a certain point. And that point, I believe, is assaulting other prisoners, assaulting staff. And you're right, we should provide whatever counseling needed, but we're not going to put other people at risk. And as far as weapons has got to be a number one thing too, because that could end lives. And there is an investigation. When police find stuff, same thing. We do an investigation. It's a little different in prison. But my point is, I understand what you're saying when you're saying we should give these opportunities for people. And we provide schooling, we provide all this other stuff, the free phone calls. But do you believe there should be a blank check from the taxpayer in taking care of all this?
I'm a taxpayer. I pay taxes. What I care about is individuals, and there's other countries that we can look at as examples, right, that do things a lot differently. I don't believe my taxes should go towards dehumanizing individuals. And I think that we could agree to disagree, but me having the lived experience of how people are treated as individuals inside, I can say could be a lot different. And I think there's a misconception that how people are treated on the inside is, there's this counseling, there's this. Not everybody has access to those.
And I'm not talking about dehumanizing either.
It happens.
Hold on. I in the same way. Let the individual finish their response and then respond so that we can keep control of the meeting.
Okay. I will. Senator Champagne, you and I can talk anytime. I'm accessible. If you'd like to continue this conversation, I apologize if I didn't answer it the way or give you the exact answer. I believe that there's a system that we definitely need to keep people safe. I believe there's ways to do that. And I believe that, everyone should be safe, not just the officers, but the individuals that are incarcerated as well. So I believe that everyone should be safe. And I believe that Connecticut can do a lot better with keeping people safe without dehumanizing them.
Okay. And I think that I'm just going to make, a statement that basically, we have a tax problem in Connecticut. We overtax people horribly. We're one of the most taxed in the nation. It'd be great if we could supply the money to handle everybody's needs. But when we start talking about this, we have people who have never broken the law, never been to prison, yet we give them no help. But if you break the law, there are people requesting that we give them everything. And I'm sorry, but I just don't agree with that. In order to get to prison in the state of Connecticut, it's a lot harder. And as the years go by, it makes it even worse because the law is being passed in our state. I heard it might have been you that somebody said getting locked up for a shoplifting. That doesn't happen. You got to do, unless you're stealing tens of thousands of dollars worth of stuff. I was a policeman for a long, long time, and I've watched this go through the system. They tell you when you get that job, don't even look at your arrest because you're going to be disgusted because nobody goes to jail anymore. and it takes a lot of arrests or something very serious. But my point is that we spend a lot of money, and we have to understand that there's people out there that can't afford to go to school. They can't afford to go to tractor trailer training school. They can't afford these certain things. And it'd be great if we can provide it to every single person. But, I guess I say that the person who doesn't go out and break the law should get those funds before somebody who does. But I also want to take care of the prisoners. If there is a way to help somebody, I want to do it. But we have to find a perfect balance. And that's pretty difficult to do. And again, we should never outlaw solitary confinement, but we should have a hard line as to where it gets put into effect. And it has to be public safety, because public safety has got to be number one in the prison, and it's got to be number one outside of the prison.
Mhm.
As a politician, that should be my number one, public safety, and public safety encompasses a lot. But I'm gonna end there, and good luck. And I think your perspective would be a good perspective. But when you're there, just keep in mind of the fact that the prison system has changed, and the fact that there's a lot of different sides to everything. Thank you.
I agree, and I'll just say to you, Senator Champagne, I appreciate it. And I don't know your story. I share mine a lot. But if there was ever a situation which, God forbid, you had to sell crack to feed your kids, you had to do something. I ask this question a lot in places that I've been, and I'll say to a person, what would you not do to put food on your table when all else fails? What would you not do? See, a lot of times people would say, I would never sell crack. I would never do this. I would never do that, because that's not their reality. Not that we're excusing the behavior, but we also need to understand and acknowledge that there are systems in play that force people to do things that they probably would not normally not do. And for us to not act like that doesn't exist, and that people are incarcerated for reasons of survival, and or there are a lot of people incarcerated right now that are right now as we speak that are they haven't been found guilty. So they're waiting for their day in court. So when we speak and we blanket about crime, we must talk about how crime affects different communities differently, and how people end up in a system based off of survival, and not just because they're criminals or they created a criminal, they committed an offense that was worthy of incarceration.
Yeah, and you know what? I understand where you're coming from. I grew up very poor, and when I was a kid, I had 6 paper routes, and I did everything I could, anytime I could, to make money. And then I joined the military to pay for my college. So there are ways, and there's a lot of programs out there that people can access. And maybe it's just not allowing or not getting the message out there as to what programs are available. But the fact is, making excuses for crime, in my book, it's hard for me to understand.
Well, we should hang out sometime.
Gentlemen, I'm gonna.
So thank you.
We should hang out sometime.
All right. Thank you, Senator Champagne. Representative Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And hello, Mr. McGraw. We've, as you know, we've met on a couple of occasions. And I always enjoy hearing you speak. And for some reason, you always end up getting a lot of time because you're an interesting guy. In the account of what happened to you while you're in prison, if you don't mind me asking, how long ago was that?
It was some time ago. I think I've been released. I've been out of prison since June 10, 2010. So I haven't been incarcerated since then. So I've heard things have changed, and I've heard things are the same.
Well, and that's, you're getting to the root of my question, which I think you probably already assumed, is since it's been over 10 years since your release, have you heard, and you're talking to us today to be involved with a group to try and make things better. Have you heard that things have gotten better?
I have. And you know what? We have we have people that are going to college now, right? We have these certain training programs that people are doing. There are a lot of things that are good about the system. And you know what? A lot of people, advocates, don't like when I say prison changed my life, right? It's not everybody, but for me, where I was at my life, at that time in my life, I needed to be in prison. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but that's for me, because it gave me an opportunity to reevaluate my life and create a 5-year plan. Not everybody is as fortunate.
in having heard all the things you've accomplished since you turned your life around have been impressive. And I heard you speak. But I do want to, you and I have been part of groups to work on homelessness that when people get out of prison. And I think you're aware of the good work that the Court Support Services is doing to meet with inmates before they get out. So I don't think it's 100% accurate that they're just being, and some people are getting the plastic bag and dropped off, but there's a lot of work being done meeting with inmates before they get out to make sure they have medication, a place to live, treatment in place. So I just wanted you to acknowledge that that's happening.
No, 100%, Rep. Callahan, and I'm not saying that let's just agree to disagree, or however you say. I will say that it's happening. It's still happening because I know people that it's happening to. People are still getting out without IDs. System's not perfect, but we could be better. It is happening still. It's still happening to people. People are getting it. We have these reentry centers around who are saying, man, we didn't even know this guy was coming. So people are falling through the cracks. And those are the people that we speak of. These are the people that we should be worried about, because those individuals, people are still falling through cracks when we have a system. And I have very good friends at CSSD or what have you, that and the work that they do, not saying that work is not being done. But what I'm saying is that people are falling through the cracks and ending up in situations where they're downtown. I was just downtown Norwich where a guy was walking around in his tans, which is unacceptable, right? He was on the greens and people were nervous, which was like, I was like, wow, why would this guy just be walking around in his jail clothes? But that's how he was released. And it's unfortunate, but it happens. So we as a state, Connecticut, which I go around the country, I've been around the country, we are viewed as a leader in criminal justice reform, yet there are states that are doing things a lot better than us. So I think that this group and this group that we're in, we can talk about ways to make things better, because I would never want to be that guy that got released and that's walking around in his tans.
Now, and I appreciate that point of view, especially because there are many systems in place to keep people out of jail and to keep people from failing when they get released. As you know, there's at least 7 pretrial programs. There are programs to review whatever bond is set. There are bond appeal processes already in place. So there's a lot of that already in place, but you do seem to zero in on some good points that people are falling through the cracks, and maybe a group like this could do better about filling those cracks. So there are a lot of good systems in place to try and help people not recidivate. But I was just trying to get to the root of why you want to be here and what you want to work on. And I think in maybe just in our conversation, you've answered that question, Mr. McGraw. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And it's always a pleasure. And once again, appreciate the conversation.
Thanks. Good to see you.
You as well.
Further questions or comments for Mr. McGraw? Further questions or comments? If not, Mr. McGraw, thanks for being with us, and thanks for your willingness to serve.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the questions.
All right, that is going to conclude our interviews of the nominees. We are now going to open it up to public comment. First up will be Ann Massaro. And just a reminder, folks will have 3 minutes to testify. And after 3 minutes, I'll ask you to wrap up, and if there's any questions, we'll entertain those. Ms. Massaro?
Good morning, Chairman, Co-Chairman Staffstrom, and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Ann Massaro. I appreciate the opportunity to address members of the Judiciary regarding correctional oversight as it relates to the Advisory Council. Independent oversight is crucial to the DOC in Connecticut. We are one of the very few states that doesn't have independent oversight at this point. We are not progressive in our approach to corrections. Having worked to help give voice to people who, for one reason or another, have not been allowed to have their voices heard in our democratic system all of my life, I continue to believe in our system of democracy, no matter what obstacles I have faced. However, what has happened recently, first with the PROTECT Act being passed into law and ignored by the people who are supposed to follow the law, and two, looking at the obstruction by our legislators has truly shaken my belief system. To, quote, sneak in an amendment that clearly goes against the intent of this law as put forth in the PROTECT Act and passed in a bipartisan of both houses, and it did not allow for any public input or scrutiny, is a very clear indication of a complete and utter resistance to change. If one is doing nothing wrong, not violating the human rights of incarcerated people, why resist and be afraid of independent oversight? Clearly, the department cannot police itself, as is evident from the countless lawsuits against DOC regarding the abuse of incarcerated people and medical neglect. In 2021, an audit of the department revealed the abuse of overtime by COs, inappropriate union leave payments, among other violations. Excuse me. Just recently, we've seen the law being ignored by corrections officers and others at DOC. In 2022, the PROTECT Act was passed into law, and yet is still not being enforced. This is now law and requires specified time out of cell for all incarcerated people with programming. Yet lockdowns continue on a regular basis, with the department making excuses around COVID and staff shortages. Without independent oversight, there is no advocacy or voice for people who are incarcerated against the violations they experience. There should be no fear of independent oversight if, in fact, things are running the way they should be and people are not being dehumanized. As a member of Stop Solitary Connecticut, we gathered a slate of candidates for the advisory council who, among other things, will send a list of nominees for the ombudsman position to the governor. We made certain they each represented the criteria laid out in the law before sending recommendations to legislators. It was a rigorous process. The legislators selected who they thought were the best candidates. The DOC has total control, and people who are incarcerated have no voice. The oversight must be independent, as specified in the PROTECT Act.
Ms. Massaro, we're past 3 minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry, I'll wind up. So for these reasons, I'm opposing the nominations and believe the advisory council should be comprised of the people previously nominated by legislators who were designated in the past PROTECT Act and should not include any correctional personnel.
Thank you, Ms. Massaro. Are there questions or comments from the committee? Questions or comments? If not, thanks for being with us and appreciate your advocacy.
Thank you.
Next up will be Nicholas Buckland. Nicholas Buckland. All right, then Stanquito Saduth.
One second, sorry about that. Hold on, I don't know if you can see me. Hello, how you guys doing? Good morning.
Good.
Good morning, all. Hello, my name is Stan Quinto Sutter. I'm a recently retired correction officer. I had the pleasure of working with John Bowen on the front line and as executive board for Local 391. John Bowen, I can personally say that John Bowen is an asset and brings a tremendous amount of correctional experience and knowledge. He is firm and fair in his decision making. He is also overly passionate when it comes to work, and he's also overly passionate when it comes to work. He also tries to do the right thing when it comes to members in the local. Give me one second. He remains a driving force for the agency. He's also helped develop the EAP, the assistance program, which helps staff retain their job and help them on their road to recovery. John has no issue in taking on tough tasks or having a conversation that many others shy away from. John Bowen would be key and vital to this committee. Firsthand knowledge, and especially when it comes to current and new conditions which correctional staff face. I believe in appointing John to the Judiciary Committee will be beneficial in achieving future goals and solving issues as it relates to corrections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Question from Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Great to see you this afternoon. Mr. Saduth, I just want to thank you for coming in and being patient all morning to testify on behalf of my nominee, Mr. Bowen. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And thank you for the support, not only of him, but of the mission of this group. And I think, like I said, the cross-pollination of a lot of people with a lot of different life experiences and observations, I think we're going to get a great work product out of these folks. And thank you again, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kissel. And thank you, Mr. Saduth, for being with us this morning. And thanks for your service to the Department of Corrections. Brian Witherington.
How you doing? Good afternoon, Chairman Winfield, Chairman Staffstrom, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Brian Withington. I'm currently a correction officer, as well as an executive board member of Corrections Union Local 1565. That represents close to 2,000 AFSCME members. Our local is supportive of the nominations of John Bowen and John Cipolle to the Correction Advisory Committee. I've personally worked alongside John Bowen on many important issues during his tenure as Vice President of Local 391. John retired with over 20 years of correctional experience and knowledge. Officer Cipolle has 7 years in the Department of Correction and was recently promoted to the position of Corrections Counselor. Counselor Cipolle has a very good reputation with his peers, as well as the inmate population he works with. Both of these men would be a great asset and experienced sources of advice for the Ombudsman and the members of this committee. With recently passed legislation and the ever-changing directives of the Department of Correction, some of these policies are creating an unsafe environment for staff, as well as inmates. Inmate-on-inmate assaults are almost a daily occurrence, and inmate-on-staff assaults continue to be on the rise. With things like extended out-of-cell time, it's becoming increasingly difficult to protect nonviolent offenders from violent predatory inmates. When there's little repercussions to your actions, the danger in these facilities increases tenfold. It is my belief that appointing Mr. Bowen and Mr. Cipolle to this advisory committee would provide a well-rounded, experienced insight to the Ombudsman. And I thank you for your time and consideration for this.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Withington, thank you so much for taking the time to come and testify this afternoon. I know you've been patient all morning, and I think Mr. Bowen and Mr. Cipolle will bring added insights, having worked within the facilities, especially Mr. Bowen's creative outreach regarding the support services for fellow corrections officers. And I think Mr. McGraw indicated that a similar kind of outlet or resource fashioned for inmates might be a real benefit. And again, I think the goals are not mutually exclusive. Correction officer safety, the safety of inmates, the safety of the inmate, him or herself, can be achieved at the same time minimizing use of administrative segregation or solitary confinement, or however we want to classify that. And so I'm really excited about this. And again, Mr. Withington, thank you so much for your service and for your testimony this afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. And thank you. I concur. Thanks for being with us today, Mr. Withington. Next up is Sam Gonzalez. Sam Gonzalez. Okay. Not seeing Mr. Gonzalez. We'll go to Shireen Bailey.
Hello, hi, good afternoon. Chairman Whitman and the members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Shireen Bailey, 14-year vet off Robinson. I'm here today for the nominee John Bowen, the Corrections Advisory Committee, retired 20-year veteran with frontline experience, a past vice president, 1991. I had been fortunate to work alongside as an officer and a union steward. He has taught me further knowledge of the daily call Robinson and manage efficiently and professionally. With all his leadership skills, he will the committee and contribute value to the realistic conditions of the correctional setting. The experience and wisdom of John Bowen brings to the correctional valuable I'm sorry, field is invaluable when planning new interventions to safer and more efficient environment. Its front experience and policy development skills are strong attributes to this position. The House someone who is an expert and adverse on and power, someone and knowledgeable work life and there is currently a short of front lines throughout our state. I don't understand why are dangerously under. Right now, staff are working 8 or more hours. There is an abundance of mandated overtime, exhaustion from the break, staff shortages, and assaults on staff out of work. Us are working 16 hours a day, multiple with no support. This is unsustainable. This is not it and also health and safety of the offenders. Staff cannot be expected to go in and be expected to maintain a safe working environment and offenders. Confident that we safest work conditions possible across not only for us but also the population. I'm asking the Judiciary to give serious consideration to the nomination to assist the state in enhancing the ways and the offenders. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. I think we had a little bit of cutting in and out there, but I think we got the gist of it, and certainly appreciate your testimony. Looks like a question or comment from Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Again, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Ms. Bailey for being patient all morning and testifying this afternoon on behalf of Mr. Bowen. Clearly, staffing is an issue that affects not only corrections officers' safety within the facilities, but the safety of the inmates. Back when I was a special public defender, I did represent inmates that acted up within the facilities. So I've seen these issues from the perspective of defending inmates who are charged with acting out within correctional facilities, but also close to 30 years ago when I was first elected a state senator, one of the first things that I ended up seeing firsthand with the late Jack Bailey, we stood outside as Carl Robinson had a riot going on. It was locked down. One of the buildings was burnt to the ground and an inmate was murdered within the facility as we stood outside waiting for the correction emergency response team to arrive, which at that time was comprised of then a rookie officer named Scott Semple. So appreciate your service and your testimony this afternoon, Ms. Bailey. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It looks like our connection with Sam Gonzalez is back, so I apologize about that, Mr. Gonzalez. But whenever you're ready, we'll hear from you.
Hello and great morning to you all. My name is Samuel Gonzalez. I have served as a correctional officer at Osborne Correctional Institution for the state of Connecticut Department of Corrections for over 14 years. I'm an active union steward for our local 391. I'm here to support the nominations of John Bowen and John Sepoli for seats on the Correction Advisory Committee. These two gentlemen both have accomplished extraordinary qualifications as well as established employees for the Department of Corrections. When it comes to maintaining the safety of our staff and our inmate population, they can recognize exclusive challenges others may not be able to comprehend. With the combination of John Bowen's expertise with correctional safety and security and John Sepoli's expertise with correctional programs for inmates, I have the confidence that they are an absolute asset for the Correctional Advisory Committee. I believe, excuse me, I believe that with the knowledge that they just have, that just how complicated it is to safely operate in a correctional facility, and will be essential members for the Correctional Advisory Committee. My hope for everyone that is listening today to consider the following: that our correctional facilities are understaffed and are in need of correctional officers, maintenance officers, chef supervisors, medical staff, mental health unit staff, counselors, etc. Combining that fact that we're understaffed along with the increase out of cell time for the inmates that have created conditions that are dangerous for both, not just for the inmates, for staff, and not to mention civilians that visit the facilities. It's also not taking into consideration the actual physical layout of some of the correctional facilities that are not designed to safely handle larger number of inmates in confined spaces. The disciplinary reports and inmates assaults on staff are all on the rise. I have witnessed all of these firsthand at Osborne. It is awful to witness that any assault, let alone your own coworker that has been injured in the manner that they cannot return to work or function normally at home. They can't even physically take care of themselves or significant others or even their children. Improving the infrastructure of our correctional facilities so that they will be able to safely operate and supervise the inmate population will be able to be a tremendous step in the right direction. Improving the communication, particularly between the administration and staff when it comes to transparency of how the policy and procedures are revised, edited, created, or maybe even whole in a positive work environment. As a correctional professional myself, I see John Bowen and John Sapoli joining the Correction Advisory Committee as progress in the right direction. And I just want to thank you all for this time of consideration, and God bless.
Thank you, sir. Questions or comments from the committee? Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much. God bless you too, sir. Mr. Gonzalez, for your service at Osborne up here in my district and testifying on behalf of Mr. Bowen and Mr. Sapoli. And again, all of these issues are tied together. I think staffing, infrastructure are just as critical, but certainly we want to focus on the segregation, solitary confinement issues. But again, anything that we can do as a legislature to be supportive of these initiatives to minimize the detrimental impacts of the Department of Corrections policies on inmates regarding isolation so that they can get back into society and be productive citizens, I think is worthwhile. At the same time, being supportive of the men and women with boots on the ground in our correctional facilities is critical too. So thank you, sir, for being patient and testifying. Mr. Gonzalez, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Appreciate being with us and appreciate your service. Jody Barr.
Good afternoon, Chairman Winfield, Chairman Staffstrom, and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is Jody Barr. I'm the Executive Director of AFSCME Council 4, which represents 5,000 correction officers among its 30,000 members. Our union is supportive of the nominations of John Bowen and John Sipoli to the Corrections Advisory Committee. Mr. Bowens is a retired correction officer with over 20 years of experience on the job. Officer Sipoli has 7 years on the job and recently been promoted to the position of corrections counselor trainee. Officer Sipoli has a reputation for being able to communicate and assist our inmates. Both men would be positive sources of advice for the ombudsman and other members of this committee. It is an important time for the experience and wisdom of these officers that they possess to be brought to the correction policy arena. There have been several big changes in corrections lately. While these changes are well intended, some of them are creating dangerous and difficult conditions for inmates and staff. The Connecticut News Junkie reported this summer that the spike in assaults by inmates against staff, staff says that the biggest part of their problem is protecting inmates from the small percentage of predatory inmates. This job has been made more difficult because of the increase of daily out of cell time, without commensurate increase in staff. This is why the assault numbers have spiked. Our staff are often worried that the conditions have become far more dangerous. The News Junkie reported that in 2018, there were 95 staff assaults. The article states that the current rate is set to reach about 163 assaults for this year. This is unacceptable. Please consider that the average mortality rate for a correction officer is 59 years of age. That means the average correction officer dies 18 years earlier than the average citizen. Legislators should consider this mortality a policy failure. It should keep us all awake at night. Please help us by bringing this mortality rate age up for our correction members. We urge the new Correction Advisory Committee to look at this mortality gap and explore ways to improve it. Making conditions safer for staff and inmates is essential. Appointing Mr. Bowen and Mr. Sipoli is a step in the right direction. The ombudsman that the advisory committee reports to has vast power to weigh in on every aspect of corrections. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Barr, for coming to testify and being patient regarding Mr. Bowen and Mr. Sepoli, and speaking on behalf of the 4,000 state employees, members of ASME Council 4. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Mr. Barr, for being with us this morning. Okay, I'm not seeing Stephen Strom, so we're going to go to Barbara Fair.
Good afternoon, members of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on this issue of the advisory board. My name is Barbara Fair, and although I'm a part of Stop Solitary, I am come to you as an individual opposing the appointment of two correctional officers, past or recently retired or whatever. I'm opposed to having them on the committee because the primary basis around this committee was to have an independent oversight over DOC. We already know from all the things that we're reading in the paper, DOC cannot regulate itself. It cannot police itself. Now you want to put them on a board where people on the inside are supposed to trust that they can give us information, give the committee information, and that things will be better than the process that they already have inside. The internal process for grievances does not work on the inside. And so I just don't see how it's going to be better putting some of the same people who worked inside the system on this board. I think the using the Public Act 22-114 Section C of the HB 5372 bill, which is actually about periodic behavioral health assessments of police officers, is actually a desperate attempt to render this committee ineffective in providing independent oversight. I think it's to backdoor obstructionism at its best. It reminds me of the exception clause that was written into the amendment to abolish slavery, which kept slavery alive as long as people were in prisons. You don't need to be a legal expert or to have a JD license degree to understand what's happened by putting correctional officers or past correctional officers on this committee. No one is going to trust the process, and this is what it's all about. Victims have a whole state agency that cater to their needs. Department of Corrections have boards. Unions have boards. Why is it so? And why are people against incarcerated people having something where they can talk about what's going on inside of them? We talk a lot about public safety. Public safety begins with treating people right. Abusing and dehumanizing people makes all of us unsafe. So if we want to really be talking about public safety, let's start on the inside when treating people like they're human beings, like they are. The many stories that I hear whenever this issue comes up, these scary stories about what's going on in prison, I can say two things. I have just as many or more stories to match them from people inside, and also in talking to the president of last year of the union. He said 90% of the people inside are not a threat at all. They just want to do their time. So I don't know why they continue with these scary stories about what's going on inside.
Ms. Fair, we're past the 3 minutes. So
okay, so I just want to say, is there no honor and no moral integrity in the law anymore? Because when law enforcement and law officers become lawless, they invite anarchy. So I feel we're at a crossroads, and I question if we now need to have oversight over lawmakers to make sure that these kind of backdoor decisions don't get made. Thank you.
Representative Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming in, Ms. Fair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are you saying that having a former correction officer or a present correction counselor as part of this board that perhaps could answer questions for the other committee members would be a bad thing?
Oh, no. What I'm saying is we already have Commissioner Scott Semple, who is the best person you could possibly get. He was over the entire department. And if we have him on the board, there's no need to have another person to be an expert on the board.
All right, that's my only question. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions or comments from Ms. Fair? Seeing none, thank you for being with us, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Colin Provost will be next.
Good afternoon, Judiciary Committee, Chair Staffstrom, Chair Winfield, ranking members Kissel, Fishbein, and others that are in attendance for the Judiciary Committee. I come to you with 18 years of experience in corrections as a corrections officer and 8 years and 10 years now as president. I'd like to speak on behalf of Correctional Counselor Sapoli, recently promoted to my local in the same facility that I work in. I would like to, say that he's a good guy, has a great background of 7 years working at Cheshire. Speaking more to John Bowen, was 6 years as vice president and honorably served beside me. He has 21 years of correctional experience within Connecticut, serving in several facilities, that being Osborne Correctional Institution, Carl Robinson Correctional Institution, and also working in CTU, which is the Correctional Transportation Unit, having seen all of the facilities in the state, traveling around from facility to facility and transporting inmates. His experience with investigations throughout his time here with the union would give a vast knowledge of how video, explaining the use of restraints, how the use of force continuum and the training around those items could be necessary to this panel and the Correctional Advisory Committee. Our staffing levels within the facilities is a great challenge that we deal with every day. People being drafted and held to multiple shifts, and the reduction in the inmate incarcerated individuals over my tenure has gone from over 20,000 inmates down to somewhere around the 10 to 11,000. So in general population now we have increased the violent inmate population within general pop. So I think this lends to the increase of assaults on staff and other inmates and violent inmates, and the need for the continued use of segregation or restrictive housing, and still allowing inmates to have their out of cell time during that time, as it's been increased. In my time of working in RHU in the facility, we always had MHU or a medical, the mental health unit available to us, and anytime an inmate called for them, they were able to come in and speak with them. So I thank you all for your time, and I'd be open to any questions as far as that's concerned, but I'm here to support both those individuals for the Correctional Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Provost, thank you for your leadership and being president of Local 391. It's great to see you via Zoom. Had a real pleasure speaking with you not that long ago in person in my office at the Capitol. And I appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to speak on behalf of Mr. Bowen and Mr. Sapoli. And I do also agree that the goals of the unionized professionals, the men and women with boots on the ground, are not opposite to the goals of reducing the use of solitary confinement, segregated housing, and things like that, the implementation of better mental health policies. And I think that bringing folks with these kinds of insights from differing positions within our society can only be beneficial. And again, the cross-pollination, I think that will be awesome. And I'm really looking forward to the productive interplay of individuals on this group as they move forward with the challenges affecting all of us, not only within corrections, but outside the department regarding mental health issues. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to testify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? If not, Mr. Provost, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Last name I have on my list is Amanda Tower. Amanda Tower, I don't see her. Madam Administrator, anyone we've missed signed up to testify? No?
No, we're all set.
All right, so I'm going to declare this public hearing closed. Before we leave, I do think this will likely be the last time that we will be together for this session. So I just want to certainly wish everyone a happy and healthy holiday. I know certainly we will have many members of this committee hopefully back next year. I know not everybody has announced, but at least the co-chairs I know will be back for next session, and we're hoping most of you will join us. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a couple staff changes that have taken effect and are likely to continue into the next session. I see the ranking member is shaking his head vigorously. I hope that's not because he's upset about our new administrator, who is off and hitting the ground running. As many folks know, Deb Blanchard, who had been the administrator of this committee for many years, retired from the General Assembly, and we're very fortunate to have Christian Bernier come over from Regs Review to be the new Judiciary Committee Administrator. So very excited to announce that for folks who've not heard. I also have I think this is probably why the ranking member is shaking his head so vigorously after 4 years.
Can't hear it.
Signing off. He wants the record to reflect he's signing off. But after nearly 4 years as the clerk of the Judiciary Committee, Zoe Gluck is moving on to greener pastures as well. She is taking over as the new deputy director of policy for the House Democrats. So she will still be around. She will still be working with the Judiciary Committee. But we're thrilled to announce and welcome Nathan Kletchman, who will be the new clerk of the Judiciary Committee. Actually, I think effective as of today. So welcome to your first day, Nate. Happy to have him on board as well. Senator Kissel, anything I missed?
No, I just for the members that are leaving, and I know that Senator Champagne's one of them because he chose not to run again. I just wish them the very best outside the legislature and thank them for their service to the people of Connecticut. And I just wish everybody Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and happy whatever they believe in or nothing, but a great holiday season. And I want to thank both co-chairs. I think the leadership of this committee is awesome, and the fact that both of you have been renominated as co-chairs of this committee. We haven't got our assignments in Senate Republicans, but I'm just thankful that you guys will be leading the way on the Judiciary Committee, and hopefully I'll be a member going forward.
Well, thank you, Senator, and we certainly hope you're back with us in January as well. You did miss Kwanzaa, so
I thought I had Kwanzaa. No,
I mean not Kwanzaa. You did miss Festivus.
Oh yes,
you missed. So you got
one for the rest of us.
You forgot Festivus. So I'm going to turn it over to Representative Fishbein to see if he has any grievances to air before we leave.
No, I was
or
able
feats of strength.
I was able to leave the room, take a couple of Prozac, and I'm back. I didn't have to listen to what I missed in the interim. I just wish happy holidays to all and look forward to seeing everyone perhaps in January. Thank you.
All right, everybody, take care, enjoy the holiday, and for those we won't see, thanks for your service to the Judiciary Committee. And